Hey everyone, this is John from PhoneDog.com and DroidDog.com, and today I'm shooting a dogfight between HTC's HD2, which is a Windows mobile phone with HTC's custom UI Sense on top of it, and Google's Nexus 1, which is also manufactured by HTC and runs the stock Android operating system without Sense on top of it. When you're done watching this video, head on over to the new forums at PhoneDog.com where you can discuss the HD2, the Nexus 1, and lots of other devices in their own dedicated sections. Alright, let's get to it. So let's start just by taking a little tour around the outsides of these phones. On both, the first thing you're likely to notice is the large WVGA display. And both phones are at 800 by 480, although the HD2 has a 4.3-inch screen while the N1 has a 3.7-inch. Both are capacitive, both are pretty reflective. Just based on my experience after using the HD2 and then later the N1, I felt like the HD2 was more of a problem in the sunlight and well-lit areas, but it turns out that they're pretty close when I sit down to do a more accurate comparison. Now the HD2 has these 5 hardware buttons down at the bottom: call, home, Windows button, back, and end, power, while the Nexus has 4 capacitive buttons, touch-sensitive buttons: back, menu, home, and search, which is a context-sensitive button. Software is programmed to handle an entry differently depending on what app you're in or what section of the operating system. The HD2 is a bit heavier at 157 grams. The N1 is 130. And in terms of their actual practical difference in size, you can see that they're very close in depth. As for width, the HD2 is maybe 1/4 of an inch wider. And for height, this one's a little more difficult for me to show. Again, the HD2 is like 1/4 of an inch, something like that. As for controls, you see both have a volume rocker on the left side. N1's is a little more subtle. Both have this sort of alternating color wrapping around the edge, which I think is a nice look. You can see the N1 looks a little more rounded, which isn't for everybody. Personally, I think it's a little bit sleeker, but both look pretty stylish if you ask me. Input on the bottom, both are micro USB. HD2 has a 3.5mm audio jack on the bottom, whereas with the N1 it's on top alongside the power button. Nothing on top of the HD2. Both have a 5-megapixel camera with autofocus, but the HD2 has a dual LED flash, whereas the N1 just has a single LED. The battery cover on the HD2 I had a little bit of trouble with. For some reason, it's not snapping right back into place very easily. It's not a big problem, and it could just be this unit. The N1 pops off like that, where you have to slide it up, whereas the HD2 you just push it on and off. The batteries, in the N1 you're getting a 1400 milliampere battery, and the HD2 has 1230 milliampere hours. But one area where the HD2 really excels is in standby time, and you really have to hand it to HTC for pulling this off. Whereas the N1 has up to 10 hours of talk time in 2G and 7 hours on 3G, the HD2 has up to 320 minutes on WCDMA and up to 380 minutes on GSM. But for standby time, the HD2 is at 390 for WCDMA and 490 for GSM, whereas the N1 is 290 for 2G and 250 for 3G. So you've got 200 extra hours on the HD2 on GSM standby time. So I mean, practically speaking, if you've got the HD2 just sitting there not doing anything with the screen off, it's gonna last you days. And it's really nice to see that. It's a good surprise, to go pick up the phone that you haven't touched in a couple of days and have it be 75% full on battery. As you can see, both screens are susceptible to fingerprints. I don't believe either of them have any kind of oleophobic coating, so they do attract the oil from your fingers. They're not as easy to wipe off as, say, the Hero was. But again, they're beautiful displays. They really do look great. Both of these phones have the 1 GHz Snapdragon processor, so performance in that regard is similar, at least as far as the operating systems can manage that power. Both have 512 megabytes of ROM, but the N1 does have just a little bit more RAM than the HD2. HD2 has 448 megabytes, whereas the N1 has 512. However, those are not all available to the user. There's some talk of an official update that's going to free up some memory on the N1. It is a very new phone, and actually down the line there's a chance that Google will officially support apps to SD, which allows you to install large applications directly to your SD card. Both of these phones support SD cards up to 32 gigabytes. The HD2 ships with Windows Mobile 6.5 and the Nexus with Android 2.1, so you do get Google Maps with navigation on this phone. One thing I should mention is that there was an announcement today about a new over-the-air update coming out for the Nexus 1 that will better implement the multi-touch features of Android, most notably pinch to zoom in the Maps app, in the native browser, and in the gallery, so that you can do this to zoom in and out on in all three applications. I'm hoping to get that update sometime today or tomorrow. I'm not sure when it's going out, but I'll do a video over at droiddog.com of the entire update process. Now, some of you may have seen a video I did over at DroidDog where I looked at the HD2's Sense UI and wondered how many of these kinds of features we're going to find in the next Android version of Sense. And we're probably going to have to wait until Bravo gets a little bit closer to release. That's HTC's next big Nexus-like phone. It's got a lot of the same specs, but it will be running HTC's Sense, which I think is beautiful. And as you can see here, it's running over Windows Mobile. It used to be called TouchFlow, now it's Sense, and it's just a very pretty layer on top of Android that allows you to interact with different settings and applications with a much prettier interface than Windows Mobile provides. Much prettier interface. It also comes along with some apps that aggregating data from multiple social networks under one contact. So for instance, you can look under a person and find their Facebook updates, their last tweet, emails from multiple addresses. So it really just works to bring all of these different streams of data together under the contact, which is a nice way to manage it. Now, Sense on Android is very different from Sense on Windows Mobile, and I have to admit that I'm definitely partial to Android. I wouldn't call myself a fanboy, but given the choice between Windows Mobile and Android, I'm going to pick Android every time, no question about it. So, I think you need to know that before we dive into the software here. I'm sure there will be a lot of Windows Mobile enthusiasts out there shouting at the screen. Now, using this ribbon controller at the bottom of the screen, this Sense addition to Windows Mobile, you can run through some of your most common apps or different home screens, depends on how you want to look at it. Here is Peep, and this is the HTC Sense Twitter client, which functions as basically a home screen in Windows Mobile and a widget in Android. One of the really flashy kind of eye candy treats to the HD2 and to all of the forthcoming Sense devices, I hope, is this killer weather app with animated conditions. What I really dislike about Windows Mobile are the settings. It seems like settings for parts of the software that should be sitting right next to each other are separated in totally different areas of the phone, and I don't understand that.